The wolves say an Omega's worth is measured in weakness, that we are born to serve, to bow, to fade into shadows. I believed them. For what else could I believe? My own mother left me at the northern Ridgepack's border when I was 5, a copper-haired child with nothing but a threadbare blanket and the crushing weight of abandonment. "Be brave, Elena," she whispered, before disappearing into the darkness. I waited until my tears froze against my cheeks, until hope became a luxury I could no longer afford. For 10 years I lived as the pack demanded, invisible, silent, grateful merely to exist. I learned to make myself small, to expect nothing, to believe I deserved nothing. When they whispered worthless, I nodded. When they said broken, I accepted. The lies became my truth, until the day ice-blue eyes found mine across a crowded courtyard, and the most feared wolf in all 6 territories saw something in me that no one, not even I, had ever seen before. They say the Alpha King Kale is merciless, that his power was forged in blood, and his heart turned to stone long ago. What they don't say is that he knows secrets older than the packs themselves, that he once loved an Omega Queen, that he believes our kind were never meant to be slaves, but saviors. Now I stand at the threshold, between what I was taught to be and what I might become, between the abandoned girl who believed herself worthless and the woman whose power might save a kingdom. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. The moon hung full and unforgiving in the night sky, casting silver light across the forest border, where the small bundle lay trembling. Inside the worn blanket, a 5-year-old girl with copper hair and frightened amber eyes struggled to understand why her mother had placed her on the cold ground, why she had whispered those last words, "Be brave, Elena," before disappearing into the shadows of the trees. "Mama?" Elena called again, her small voice swallowed by the vastness of the wilderness. "Mama, please come back." But only the wind answered, carrying the scent of pine and something else, something wild and dangerous that made her wolf cower deep inside her. Hours passed. The temperature dropped. Elena's thin frame shook violently as she curled tighter into herself, trying to preserve what little warmth remained. Her mother had promised to return, hadn't she? Or had she imagined those words? A child's desperate hope against the cruel reality of abandonment. She didn't dare move from the spot. Moving meant admitting her mother wasn't coming back. Moving meant giving up. So she waited, tears freezing against her cheeks as the night deepened around her. It was near dawn when the patrol found her. 3 warriors from the Northern Ridge Pack, their expressions hardening as they caught her scent. "An Omega," the tallest one said, his voice laced with disgust. "Another weakling abandoned at our borders." "What should we do with it?" asked another, prodding Elena with the toe of his boot. Elena whimpered, curling tighter into herself. Even at her young age, she knew what being an Omega meant. The lowest rank, the unwanted, the burden. Her mother had tried to hide it, but Elena had seen the shame in her eyes when her wolf first stirred and revealed its nature. "Protocol says we take her to the Alpha," the 3rd warrior sighed, clearly annoyed by the inconvenience. "He'll decide if she's worth keeping or if we should just leave her for the forest to claim." Rough hands grabbed Elena, lifting her like a sack of grain. She didn't struggle. What was the point? Her mother didn't want her. These warriors didn't want her. Perhaps no one ever would. The Northern Ridgepack's village sprawled across a valley, wooden cabins nestled between ancient trees, smoke rising from chimneys into the crisp morning air. Under different circumstances, Elena might have found it beautiful. Instead, all she saw were the faces, curious, judging, pitying, as the warriors carried her toward the center of the settlement. "Another abandoned Omega," voices whispered as they passed. "Poor thing won't last a month. Better to put it out of its misery now." The Alpha's cabin stood larger than the rest, adorned with the skulls of prey and the pelts of rivals. Elena trembled as they approached. Stories of Alpha Garrett's cruelty had reached even her young ears. How he culled the weak from his pack without mercy. How he valued strength above all else. "Wait here," the tallest warrior ordered, depositing Elena on the wooden porch. "And don't even think about running, not that you'd get far." Inside, she could hear raised voices arguing about her fate. 4th one this season. "Can't feed another useless mouth. Tradition says we must at least consider." The door finally swung open, revealing a broad-shouldered man with a silver-streaked beard and cold eyes. Alpha Garrett. His gaze swept over Elena, assessing, calculating, as if determining the value of damaged goods. "Stand up, child," he commanded. Elena struggled to her feet, her legs numb from the cold and fear. She swayed slightly, but forced herself to meet his eyes. One small act of defiance in a world that had already taken everything from her. A flicker of something. Surprise, perhaps respect, crossed his features before hardening once more. "What's your name?" he demanded. "Elena," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Speak up, Omega. Weakness I might tolerate, but not cowardice." "Elena," she repeated, louder this time. Alpha Garrett circled her slowly. "How old are you, Elena?" "5, she answered, watching him cautiously. "And your mother? Where is she now?" Elena's lower lip trembled. "She left me. She said she'd come back." A harsh laugh erupted from one of the warriors. "They all say that." Alpha Garrett silenced him with a look, before turning back to Elena. "Your mother won't be coming back, child. The sooner you accept that, the better for you." The words struck Elena like physical blows, though somewhere deep inside she had already known. Still, hearing it spoken aloud made it real, undeniable, and a small sob escaped her throat before she could stop it. "Control yourself," the Alpha snapped. "Emotional Omegas are the first to be culled." Elena bit down on her lips so hard she tasted blood, but she swallowed her tears. Alpha Garrett nodded, seemingly satisfied by her effort. "You'll stay," he decided. "For now, but understand this. In my pack, everyone serves a purpose. You'll work for your keep starting today. Fail, and you'll be expelled. Is that clear?" "Yes, Alpha," Elena whispered. "Take her to the Omega quarters," he ordered the warriors, "and find something useful for her to do. Even an Omega child can sort berries or scrub pots." As they led her away, Elena caught snippets of conversation from the gathering crowd. "Won't last through winter. Another mouth to feed. Should have left her for the wolves." The Omega quarters turned out to be little more than a crude wooden shack at the edge of the village, far from the warmth and protection of the central fires. Inside, 6 other Omegas, all adults, looked up briefly as she entered, their expressions a mixture of pity and resignation. "Another one," sighed an older woman with graying hair. "Come here, little one. There's space by the wall. It's not much, but it's better than the forest floor." Elena approached cautiously, clutching her thin blanket, the only thing she had left from her mother. "I'm Martha," the woman said, helping Elena settle into a corner where straw had been piled as bedding. "You're safe here. Well, as safe as any Omega can be. Will my mama come back?" Elena asked, unable to stop herself despite knowing the answer. Martha's face softened with compassion. "No, child. But you have us now. We look after our own here. The pack may not value us, but we value each other." That night, curled on her straw bed and surrounded by the gentle breathing of the other Omegas, Elena made a silent promise to herself. She would survive. She would endure. And someday, somehow, she would prove that being an Omega didn't make her worthless. 10 years passed in a blur of hard labor and harder lessons. Elena grew from a frightened child into a slender, copper-haired 15-year-old who had learned to make herself invisible. In the Northern Ridge Pack, visibility was dangerous for an Omega. Better to blend into the shadows, to complete your tasks without drawing attention, to endure the occasional cruelty without complaint. She rose before dawn each day to light the village fires, spent mornings tending the medicinal herbs she'd secretly learned to grow, afternoons washing laundry or mending clothes, and evenings serving in the communal hall where the warriors and higher-ranked wolves ate. It was during one such evening that everything changed. Elena moved silently between tables, refilling cups and clearing plates. She had mastered the art of being present, yet unseen, efficient, yet unremarkable. But tonight, something felt different. A tension hung in the air, an electric anticipation that had every wolf on edge. "They say he's coming tonight," whispered one of the beta females at a nearby table. "The Alpha King himself?" her companion replied, skepticism clear in her tone. "Why would Kyle the Merciless bother with our small pack? Border disputes with the Eastern rogues. Alpha Garrett has requested his assistance." Elena's ears perked up despite herself. Everyone knew of Alpha King Kyle, the most powerful shifter in the 6 territories, whose very name sent shivers of fear through rival packs. Stories of his ruthlessness, his strength, his cold-blooded efficiency in battle were told around every pack's fire. "Watch yourself, Omega," snarled a voice, as a hand roughly grabbed her arm. Beta Marcus, Alpha Garrett's son and heir, glared down at her. "Eavesdropping is punishable by 10 lashes. Or have you forgotten your place?" "I wasn't," Elena began, but Marcus tightened his grip, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "Wasn't what? Sticking your nose where it doesn't belong? Thinking yourself entitled to the conversations of your betters?" Elena lowered her gaze, the practiced response of submission. "I apologize, Beta. It won't happen again." Marcus leaned closer, his breath hot against her ear. "See that it doesn't. My father may tolerate your presence, but when I become Alpha, things will change. The weak will serve or perish under my rule." He released her with a shove that sent her stumbling backward, wine sloshing from the pitcher she carried and staining her simple dress. Several warriors laughed at her clumsiness, their amusement cutting deeper than any physical blow. Elena steadied herself and continued her duties, ignoring the burning humiliation. This was life as an Omega, a constant reminder of her place at the bottom of the hierarchy. It was past midnight when the horns sounded, 3 long blasts announcing the arrival of distinguished visitors. Despite her exhaustion, Elena joined the rest of the pack as they lined up to receive the Alpha King and his entourage. The forest path blazed with torchlight as 20 warriors on horseback emerged from the trees, their armor gleaming silver in the moonlight, their expressions hard and vigilant. At their center rode a figure who commanded attention without effort. Tall, broad-shouldered, with raven-black hair and eyes the color of Arctic ice. Alpha King Kale. Even from a distance, his power was palpable, a crushing weight that made breathing difficult. Elena found herself unable to look away, though every instinct screamed at her to lower her gaze in submission. As the procession passed, something extraordinary happened. The Alpha King's horse suddenly halted, its ears pricked forward in alarm. Kyle's head turned sharply, his piercing gaze sweeping the crowd until it landed, impossibly, inexplicably, on Elena. Time seemed to stop. Their eyes locked across the distance, and Elena felt a jolt of something unfamiliar surge through her body. Not fear, though there was reason enough for that. No, this was different. A recognition. A connection that made no sense yet felt undeniable. The Alpha King's expression shifted from indifference to intense focus, his nostrils flaring slightly as if trying to catch her scent on the wind. Elena trembled under his scrutiny, unable to look away even as every fiber of her being screamed to hide. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the moment passed. Kale turned back to Alpha Garrett, who had approached to welcome him, and the procession continued toward the main hall. But Elena knew something had changed, something fundamental and irreversible. The air around her felt charged, different, as if the universe itself had shifted on its axis. "Did you see that?" whispered Martha, who had materialized beside her. "The Alpha King looked at you." "It was nothing," Elena said quickly, though she didn't believe her own words. "A coincidence." Martha's expression was troubled. "There are no coincidences with wolves like him, child. Be careful. Being noticed is dangerous for our kind." Elena nodded, but as she returned to her duties, she couldn't shake the memory of those ice-blue eyes, or the strange sensation that had passed between them, like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known existed. Later that night, as she lay on her thin pallet in the Omega quarters, sleep refused to come. Outside, a storm had gathered, rain lashing against the wooden walls of the shack, wind howling through the cracks. But it wasn't the storm keeping her awake. Something was coming. Elena could feel it in her bones, in the restless stirring of her wolf, in the electric tension of the air itself. Change was on the horizon. Whether for good or ill remained to be seen. What she couldn't possibly know was how soon that change would arrive, or how completely it would transform her world. The storm that had raged through the night left the northern Ridgepack's territory drenched and mud-slick by morning. Elena rose before dawn as always, her muscles aching from yesterday's labor, and a night of restless dreams filled with ice-blue eyes. As she splashed cold water on her face from the communal basin, Martha appeared beside her, lines of worry etched deeper than usual around her eyes. "They're looking for you," the older Omega whispered, her voice barely audible. Elena froze, water dripping from her chin. Who is? Alpha Garrett's beta guards. They came to the quarters before first light, asking where you slept. Martha gripped Elena's arm. What have you done, child? Nothing, Elena answered truthfully, her heart hammering against her ribs. Being singled out was never good for an Omega. I swear it. Martha studied her face, then nodded once. I believe you. But that makes it all the more concerning. Stay close to me today if you can. But it was already too late. The door to the washing area swung open, revealing two imposing beta guards, their expressions stern in the dim morning light. Elena of No House, the taller one announced formally. You are summoned to the Alpha's council chamber immediately. Elena's mouth went dry. In 10 years, she had never been summoned anywhere except to perform menial tasks. The Alpha's council chamber was where pack business was conducted, where alliances were forged and punishments decided. May I ask why? She ventured, struggling to keep her voice steady. The guards exchanged glances. That is not for us to say. Come now. Martha squeezed her hand once before releasing her. The gesture said everything words couldn't. Be careful. Be brave. And if the worst happens, know you are loved by someone. Elena followed the guards across the muddy compound, acutely aware of the stairs following her progress. Omegas being escorted by beta guards could mean only one thing in the eyes of the pack: trouble. The council chamber occupied the second floor of Alpha Garrett's dwelling, a circular room dominated by a massive wooden table carved from a single ancient tree. Intricate pack histories decorated its surface, generations of Northern Ridge Alphas immortalized in the polished wood. When Elena entered, 5 figures were already seated around the table. Alpha Garrett, his son Marcus, 2 senior pack elders, and Alpha King Kale. Elena's breath caught in her throat. In the clear light of morning, the Alpha King was even more intimidating than he had been the previous night. Power radiated from him like heat from a flame, his presence commanding every molecule of air in the room. He wore no crown, needed no symbols of status. His authority was written in the straight line of his shoulders, the unwavering intensity of his gaze. That gaze now fixed on Elena, as she stood awkwardly by the door, uncertain where to look or what to do. No Omega had ever been admitted to this room before, let alone invited to stand before the highest-ranking Alphas in the territories. Approach, Alpha Garrett commanded, his tone unreadable. Elena moved forward on trembling legs, stopping a respectful distance from the table. She kept her eyes lowered, though she could feel the Alpha King's stare like a physical touch against her skin. Do you know why you're here, Omega? Alpha Garrett asked. No, Alpha, she answered truthfully. Look at me when I address you, he snapped. Elena raised her eyes, carefully avoiding the Alpha King's direction. Alpha King Kale has made an unusual request, Alpha Garrett continued, clearly displeased. He has asked that you be released from your service to Northern Ridge Pack. Shock rendered Elena momentarily speechless. Released? What could that possibly mean for an Omega? Release usually meant expulsion, a death sentence for those without the protection of a pack. I don't understand, she finally managed. That makes 2 of us, Alpha Garrett replied dryly. However, the Alpha King's wishes supersede pack law. If he desires your release, it will be granted. For the first time, Alpha King Kale spoke, his voice deep and smooth as polished stone. I'm not seeking her expulsion, Alpha Garrett. I'm requesting her transfer to the Royal Pack. The room fell silent, tension thickening the air. Elena dared a glance at the Alpha King, finding his expression impossible to read. His features might have been carved from marble for all the emotion they revealed. With all due respect, Your Majesty, Marcus interjected, leaning forward. She's merely an Omega, hardly worthy of the Royal Pack's attention, let alone its resources. I don't recall asking for your assessment, Beta Marcus, the Alpha King replied, his tone mild, yet carrying an unmistakable warning that made Marcus immediately lean back in his chair. Alpha Garrett cleared his throat. While my son speaks out of turn, his concern has merit. The girl has no notable skills or abilities. She was abandoned at our borders as a child, an unwanted Omega with no lineage or value. What possible use could she be to the Royal Pack? The Alpha King's gaze never wavered from Elena's face, though he addressed Alpha Garrett. Her usefulness is not your concern. I have my reasons. A heavy silence fell. Elena's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Why would the most powerful Alpha in the 6 territories want her? A nobody, a nothing, in his pack. Very well, Alpha Garrett finally conceded, unable to refuse the Alpha King directly. She will be released to your custody. He turned to Elena. You will gather your belongings and depart with the Alpha King's entourage when they leave at noon. Elena opened her mouth, then closed it, unsure what response was expected. Thank you? Protest? Beg to stay in the only home she'd known for 10 years? However harsh it had been? You may go prepare now, the Alpha King said, his tone softening almost imperceptibly as he addressed her directly for the first time. One of my guards will escort you. As if summoned by his words, the chamber door opened, and a tall female warrior entered, an alpha by her scent, with short-cropped blonde hair and sharp, assessing eyes. She nodded respectfully to the Alpha King before turning her evaluating gaze on Elena. Captain Lysandra will ensure your safe passage to the royal pack, the Alpha King explained. You have nothing to fear. But fear was exactly what gripped Elena as she followed the warrior from the chamber. Fear of the unknown, fear of change, fear of the inexplicable interest the Alpha King had taken in her. In her experience, attention from those with power never ended well for those without it. Back in the Omega quarters, Elena found little to pack. 10 years in the Northern Ridge Pack had yielded few possessions: 2 threadbare dresses besides the one she wore, a small knife she'd been given for herb gathering, a worn blanket that was her only link to her mother, and a pouch of healing herbs she'd collected herself. Is that all? Captain Lysandra asked, watching as Elena tied her meager belongings into a small bundle. Yes, Elena answered simply. The warrior's expression softened slightly. The royal pack will provide what you need. Martha appeared in the doorway, her eyes wet with unshed tears. They say you're leaving us. Elena nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. Despite everything, these shabby quarters and the Omegas who shared them were the closest thing to family she had known. Come here, Martha said, opening her arms. Elena fell into the older woman's embrace, inhaling her familiar scent of herbs and wood smoke one last time. Listen to me, Martha whispered urgently in her ear. The royal pack is different. Their ways are not like ours. The Alpha King is not like other alphas. How do you know? Elena asked, pulling back to search Martha's face. A shadow passed across the older woman's features. I wasn't always here. Before, she shook her head. Never mind that now. Just remember, your status as an Omega may not mean what it does here. Be observant, be cautious, and whatever you do, don't draw unnecessary attention to yourself. Too late for that, Elena murmured, thinking of the Alpha King's penetrating stare. Martha gripped her shoulders. You're stronger than you know, Elena. Whatever happens, remember that. Captain Lysandra cleared her throat. It's time. With one last hug, Elena followed the warrior out of the only home she could remember, across the compound where pack members had gathered to witness her departure. Their expressions ranged from confused to contemptuous. What could the Alpha King possibly want with an Omega? The royal entourage waited at the edge of the settlement, 20 warriors mounted and ready. The Alpha King himself sat atop a massive black stallion, his gaze finding Elena immediately as she approached. You'll ride with me, he said, extending a hand down to her. Elena hesitated, looking up at him uncertainly. Physical contact between alphas and omegas was strictly forbidden in the Northern Ridge Pack, considered degrading to the higher rank. Reading her hesitation, the Alpha King's expression softened marginally. My pack, my rules, Elena. And in my pack, no one travels on foot when there are mounts to spare. Still, she paused. Why am I going with you? She asked, summoning courage she hadn't known she possessed. What do you want from me? A murmur of shock rippled through the onlookers at her audacity. Questioning an alpha directly was punishable by lashing in the Northern Ridge Pack. Questioning the Alpha King? Unthinkable. Yet instead of anger, something like approval flickered in the Alpha King's ice-blue eyes. A fair question, he acknowledged. One that deserves an answer. He glanced around at the gathered pack members. But not here. Come. He extended his hand again, and this time, Elena took it. His palm was warm and calloused from weapons training, his grip gentle yet secure as he pulled her up to sit before him on the saddle. The contact sent a shock through her system, a strange tingling sensation that spread from her hand throughout her body. With a slight pressure of his knees against the stallion's sides, they began to move. Elena sat rigidly, hyper-aware of the Alpha King's broad chest behind her, his arms on either side as he held the reins. Relax, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. I won't let you fall. Those simple words, I won't let you fall, affected Elena more profoundly than they should have. When had anyone ever promised to keep her from falling? When had anyone cared enough to try? As they passed through the village gates for the last time, Elena risked a glance back. Martha stood among the Omegas, her hand raised in farewell. Beyond her, Alpha Garrett and his son watched with cold, calculating eyes, assessing perhaps what advantage might be gained from her unexpected elevation. The path ahead wound through dense forest, climbing gradually toward the mountain pass that separated Northern Ridge territory from the central lands of the royal pack. Elena had never been beyond these forests, had never seen what lay outside the confines of the only pack she'd known. "Are you afraid?" the Alpha King asked quietly, once they were beyond the hearing of the others. Elena considered lying, then decided against it. Something told her he would know. "Yes. Good. Fear keeps us alert to danger." He paused. "But know this. In my pack, you will be under my protection. No harm will come to you there." "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Why would you protect an Omega you don't even know?" For a long moment he was silent, and Elena feared she had overstepped. Then his voice came, lower than before, meant only for her ears. "Because you are not what they think you are, Elena of No House, and neither am I." Before she could ask what he meant, he urged the stallion into a faster pace, effectively ending the conversation. The royal entourage followed suit, thundering through the forest toward a future Elena couldn't begin to imagine. Behind them, the Northern Ridge pack grew smaller in the distance, until finally, it disappeared altogether, along with the life Elena had known for 10 long years. Ahead lay the royal pack and the Alpha King's mysterious purpose for her. Whether it meant salvation or something far more dangerous remained to be seen. For 3 days, they traveled through dense forests and rugged mountain passes, pushing forward from dawn until dusk. Elena learned quickly that the Alpha King's entourage moved with military precision, every stop timed, every watch rotation coordinated, every meal efficient and purposeful. Through it all, Elena rode with the Alpha King, her body gradually adjusting to the rhythm of the horse beneath them. When they stopped to camp each night, he would lift her down from the saddle with gentle hands before turning to his duties, leaving Captain Lysandra to guide her through the unfamiliar routines of life among the royal warriors. "The King's Keep is unlike anything you've seen," Lysandra told her on the 3rd evening as they sat beside a small fire, slightly removed from the main encampment. "It's not just a pack territory. It's the seat of power for all 6 territories." Elena nodded, trying to imagine it. The Northern Ridge pack had been home to perhaps 200 wolves at most. From Lysandra's descriptions, the royal pack housed thousands. "And where will I fit in such a place?" she asked hesitantly. The warrior regarded her thoughtfully. "That remains to be seen. The king rarely explains his decisions until he's ready." She paused, her sharp gaze assessing Elena. "But I will say this. In 10 years serving him, I have never seen him bring an Omega into the royal household. Then why me?" It was the question that had plagued Elena since they'd departed, growing more urgent with each passing mile. Lysandra shook her head. "That is for him to tell you, not me." Their conversation ended abruptly, as the Alpha King approached, his tall figure silhouetted against the larger fires behind him. Lysandra immediately stood, offering a respectful nod before departing, leaving Elena alone with the most powerful Alpha in the 6 territories. "We reach the King's Keep by midday tomorrow," he said, lowering himself to sit across from her. The flames cast dancing shadows across his features, softening the hard angles of his face. "Yes, Your Majesty," Elena replied, unsure what else to say. "Kale," he corrected. "When we speak privately, you may use my name." Elena's eyes widened at the unprecedented permission. An Omega, addressing the Alpha King by his given name? It was unheard of. "I understand this transition is difficult for you," he continued, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You've been taught certain expectations about your place in pack hierarchy." "Yes, Kale," she managed, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. "Those expectations don't apply in my pack," he said firmly. "At least, not in the way you're accustomed to." Elena gathered her courage. "Then how will I know my place?" Something like amusement flickered in his ice-blue eyes. "You'll learn. But know this, in the royal pack, we value contribution over designation. Your worth will be determined by what you offer, not the rank you were born to." "What could an Omega possibly offer the royal pack?" she asked, echoing Alpha Garrett's dismissive question from days before. The Alpha King's gaze intensified, as if he were seeing something in her that remained invisible to everyone else, perhaps even to herself. "More than you realize," he answered cryptically. "But for tonight, rest. Tomorrow brings challenges enough." He rose to leave, then paused, reaching into a pocket of his leather vest. "I almost forgot. This is yours now." He extended his hand, revealing a small silver pendant in the shape of a wolf's head, hanging from a simple leather cord. "What is it?" Elena asked, hesitantly accepting the gift. "A royal mark. It identifies you as under my personal protection. Wear it always, especially once we reach the keep." She slipped the cord over her head, the pendant settling against her collarbone, surprisingly warm against her skin. "Thank you." He nodded once before turning away, disappearing into the shadows beyond the firelight. Elena touched the pendant, wondering at its significance. Personal protection from the Alpha King himself was no small thing, but why did she need it? What awaited her at the King's Keep that required such a shield? Morning came too quickly, and with it, a palpable shift in the atmosphere among the royal warriors. They moved with heightened alertness, eyes constantly scanning their surroundings as they entered what Lysandra identified as royal pack territory. "The border is heavily patrolled," she explained as they mounted up. "But still, we take no chances with the king's safety." By mid-morning, the dense forest began to thin, giving way to carefully tended lands, orchards and fields interspersed with smaller settlements, all displaying the royal emblem Elena now wore around her neck. Then, as they crested a final hill, the King's Keep came into view. Elena gasped involuntarily. Rising from the valley floor like a mountain shaped by human hands, the massive stone fortress commanded the landscape. Multiple walls ringed the central citadel, each higher than the last, with towers that seemed to pierce the clouds themselves. Even from this distance, she could see figures moving along the battlements, the sun glinting off armor and weapons. "The outer wall encompasses the entire royal city," the Alpha King explained, his chest warm against her back as they paused to take in the view. "Almost 10,000 souls dwell within, wolves and humans alike." Humans? Elena couldn't hide her surprise. In the Northern Ridge Pack, humans were regarded with suspicion at best, hostility at worst. "The royal pack has maintained peace with the human kingdoms for generations," he replied. "Many serve in the keep or live in the city below." They continued down the hillside, following a wide paved road that led directly to the massive gates of the outer wall. As they approached, horns sounded from the towers, 3 long blasts announcing the Alpha King's return. The gates swung open, revealing a bustling city street, lined with people who immediately dropped to their knees as the royal procession passed. Elena felt their curious stares, heard their whispered questions about the copper-haired girl riding with their king. Through winding streets they rode, climbing steadily toward the central citadel. Each layer of the city revealed increasing wealth and status, from the simple wooden structures of the outer ring to the elegant stone townhouses of what Lysandra had called the noble quarter. Finally, they reached the inner gates, massive constructions of iron-reinforced wood, guarded by warriors wearing the distinctive silver armor of the royal guard. These too swung open at their approach, admitting them to the central keep itself. A sprawling courtyard opened before them, bordered by imposing stone buildings and dominated by a central structure that could only be the royal residence. Servants and guards moved with purpose across the open space, all pausing to bow as the Alpha King's procession entered. They halted before a wide staircase leading to the main entrance. The Alpha King dismounted first, then reached up to help Elena down. Her legs felt wobbly after days in the saddle, and she stumbled slightly as her feet touched the ground. His hand steadied her, lingering on her arm a moment longer than necessary. "Welcome to the King's Keep," he said, his voice pitched for her ears alone. Before Elena could respond, their moment was interrupted by the arrival of a striking woman descending the steps toward them. Tall and regal, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in an elaborate style, she moved with the confident grace of one accustomed to authority. "Brother," she called, her voice warm, yet somehow still commanding. "We expected you yesterday." "Storms in the mountain pass delayed us, Serena," the Alpha King replied, releasing Elena's arm as the woman approached. Lady Serena, as Elena would soon learn she was called, embraced the Alpha King briefly before turning her sharp gaze to Elena. Unlike the open hostility she had faced in the Northern Ridge Pack, the woman's assessment seemed merely curious, though no less intimidating for it. "And who is this?" she asked, one elegant eyebrow raised. "Elena of the Northern Ridge Pack," the Alpha King replied. "She will be joining the royal household under my protection." Something flashed in Serena's eyes. Surprise, certainly, but also something deeper, more calculating. Indeed, she circled Elena slowly. "And what special skills does this girl possess to warrant such an unusual arrangement?" The Alpha King's expression remained impassive. "That is not your concern, sister." A tense silence stretched between them, laden with unspoken questions, and what Elena sensed was a long history of similar confrontations. Finally, Serena inclined her head slightly. "As you wish. Shall I have quarters prepared in the eastern wing?" "The North Tower," he corrected. "The suite adjoining my own." At this, even the disciplined royal guards couldn't hide their shock. Serena's composure cracked, her eyes widening. "Kale, that's my decision," he finished firmly. "See to it, please." Serena's mouth tightened into a thin line, but she nodded once before turning to Elena. "Come then, girl. You must be exhausted from your journey. I'll show you to your quarters." The emphasis on the last word made it clear just how unprecedented this arrangement was. Elena glanced uncertainly at the Alpha King, who nodded encouragingly. "Go with my sister. Rest. We'll speak again at dinner." With no choice but to obey, Elena followed Serena up the stone steps and into the royal residence. The interior of the keep was even more impressive than its exterior. Soaring ceilings supported by massive columns, intricate tapestries depicting pack histories, polished stone floors covered in part by luxurious carpets. Servants paused in their duties to bow as they passed, their expressions betraying their curiosity about the newcomer being escorted by Lady Serena herself. "The North Tower has been unoccupied for some time," Serena commented as they climbed a spiral staircase. "Not since our mother was alive." Elena didn't know how to respond to this information, so she remained silent, focusing instead on not tripping over her own feet as they ascended higher and higher. Finally, they reached a heavy wooden door, banded with iron. Serena produced a key from a pocket in her elegant dress and unlocked it, pushing it open to reveal a circular chamber that took Elena's breath away. Windows ringed the entire room, offering panoramic views of the keep, the city below, and the mountains beyond. The space was dominated by a massive four-poster bed draped in midnight blue silks. A sitting area with comfortable-looking chairs faced a fireplace large enough for Elena to stand in. Another door presumably led to bathing facilities, while a third stood closed on the opposite wall. "That connects to my brother's private chambers," Serena said, following Elena's gaze to the third door. "These rooms were designed for the Alpha Queen. They have remained empty since my mother's death 20 years ago." The implication hung heavy in the air between them. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks as she realized what Serena was suggesting. "There must be some mistake," she said quickly. I'm an Omega. I couldn't possibly—" "What you are remains to be seen," Serena interrupted, her sharp gaze assessing Elena with new interest. "My brother has never brought a female to the keep before, let alone installed her in the Queen's chambers. Whatever he sees in you—" She paused, then shook her head. "Well, I suppose we'll all discover that in time." She moved toward the door. "Servants will bring hot water for bathing, and suitable clothing for dinner. I suggest you take advantage of both." Her tone made it clear this was less suggestion than command. "Lady Serena," Elena called as the woman reached the threshold. "May I ask, what happens now?" Serena turned back, something almost like sympathy softening her features momentarily. "Now, Elena of Northern Ridge, you discover why my brother brought you here, and may the Moon Mother help you when you do." With those ominous words, she departed, leaving Elena alone in chambers fit for royalty, clutching a worn bundle containing everything she'd ever owned, and wondering what fate awaited her in this strange new world. The hot bath was a luxury Elena had never experienced before. In the Northern Ridge Pack, Omegas washed with cold water from the stream, even in winter. Now, sinking into the steaming, scented water, she felt layers of grime and tension melting away from her travel-weary body. 3 female servants had prepared the bath, their movements efficient and respectful. Unlike the pack members she'd grown up with, they showed no contempt for her Omega status. "Is there anything else you require, miss?" asked the eldest, a plump woman with kind eyes. "No, thank you," Elena replied, still uncomfortable with being served. "The Lady Serena has sent appropriate attire for dinner," the woman continued, gesturing to several gowns laid across the bed. After they departed, Elena soaked until the water began to cool, trying to make sense of her new reality. In less than a week, she had gone from despised Omega to, what exactly? Guest of the Alpha King. Royal ward? The Queen's chambers suggested something else entirely. A soft knock announced the servant's return to help her dress in a gown of deep emerald silk that complemented her copper hair. The transformation was completed with soft leather slippers that felt like clouds after years of worn boots. The pendant, Elena remembered suddenly, reaching for the silver wolf's head. "Of course," the eldest servant said, placing it around Elena's neck. "The king's mark of protection. You must indeed be special to receive such a token." Before Elena could respond, Captain Lysandra arrived to escort her, now dressed in formal attire, a military-style jacket in royal blue over black trousers. "You clean up well," she commented. "Ready? A word of advice," Lysandra said quietly as they descended the winding staircase. "The royal court can be more dangerous than any battlefield. Watch. Listen. Speak only when directly addressed." "Who will be there?" Elena asked, anxiety knotting her stomach. "The king's inner circle. His sister, his top advisors, perhaps a few visiting dignitaries." Lysandra's expression turned serious. "Some will be curious about you. Others will resent your presence. Trust none of them until you know who stands where." They arrived at massive double doors guarded by warriors in ceremonial armor. "The king's guest," Lysandra announced. The guards opened the doors, revealing a great hall that took Elena's breath away. The space was dominated by a long table set with silver and crystal that glittered in the light of hundreds of candles. Tapestries depicting epic battles adorned the walls, while musicians played soft melodies from a gallery above. Conversation halted as Elena entered, all eyes turning to assess the newcomer. About 20 people were already seated, with the Alpha King at the head of the table, Serena to his right. An empty chair to his left suggested Elena's place, a position of highest honor that sent ripples of whispered speculation through the gathered court. "Ah, Elena," the Alpha King said, rising as she approached. His deep voice carried easily across the hall. "Join us." He wore formal attire, a deep blue jacket with silver embroidery, black trousers, and polished boots. The simple crown resting on his dark hair was the only obvious sign of his royal status. As Elena moved toward the empty seat, she felt the weight of scrutiny from everyone present. One gaze in particular seemed to burn into her. A handsome man seated near Serena, with aristocratic features and cold, calculating eyes. "You look lovely," the Alpha King said quietly, as Elena sat, his ice-blue eyes warming slightly. "Thank you," she murmured, fighting a blush. "For everything." He nodded before addressing the table. "For those who haven't been introduced, this is Elena. She is under my personal protection and will be residing in the keep from now on." The announcement sent a wave of whispers around the table. "What an unexpected honor," said the cold-eyed man, his voice smooth as silk yet somehow cutting. "May we inquire as to the nature of your relationship with our king?" Elena froze, unsure how to respond. "You may not, Lord Damien," the Alpha King replied before she could speak. "Elena's position in this court is not subject to your inquiry." Lord Damien inclined his head, though his eyes remained fixed on Elena. "Of course, Your Majesty. I merely wish to welcome our new guest appropriately." "Your welcome is noted," the king said dryly. "Now, I believe we have more pressing matters to discuss, namely, the Eastern Rogue situation." With that, conversation shifted to military matters. Reports of increased rogue wolf activity along the eastern borders, and the Alpha King's recent efforts to forge alliances with smaller packs. Elena observed the dynamics around the table. Lady Serena wielded considerable influence, with court members often looking to her before forming their own responses. Lord Damien clearly held some significant position, given the deference shown to him, though the tension between him and the Alpha King was palpable. "The rogues grow bolder," reported a grizzled warrior Elena later learned was General Thorne. 3 more attacks on outlying farms this month alone. "And yet you counsel patience, my king?" Lord Damien interjected. "While our people suffer, I counsel careful consideration before committing our forces to open conflict." the Alpha King replied evenly. The rogues want war. I will not give it to them until I understand what drives them. Perhaps what drives them is simply their nature, Damien suggested, his gaze sliding to Elena. Some wolves, after all, cannot overcome their baser instincts. The implication, that Omegas, like rogues, were governed by instinct rather than reason, was clear. Elena kept her expression neutral with effort, though inside, humiliation burned hot. The Alpha King's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly. You speak of instincts, Lord Damien? Then perhaps you should pay closer attention to your own. The rebuke, though subtle, was unmistakable. Damien's face flushed slightly. Of course, Your Majesty. I meant no disrespect. When dinner finally concluded, court members approached the king with matters requiring his attention. Come, Lysandra murmured at Elena's side. The king asked me to show you the gardens while he attends to court business. The royal gardens spread across several acres, formal paths winding between carefully tended flower beds. Fountains sparkled in the moonlight, their gentle splashing creating a peaceful backdrop. You handled yourself well in there, Lysandra commented. The royal court devours those who show weakness. I felt anything but strong, Elena admitted. Especially when Lord Damien is the king's cousin, Lysandra interrupted. He serves as royal steward, overseeing the administration of the keep. He's also been positioning himself as the king's successor for years. Successor? But wouldn't the Alpha King's child inherit the throne? The king has no mate, no offspring. By tradition, if he dies without an heir, leadership would pass to his closest male relative, Damien. And Lady Serena? Pack law forbids female alphas from ruling alone, Lysandra explained. Serena holds considerable influence as the king's sister, but she cannot inherit the throne. Elena absorbed this information, understanding the political undercurrents better now. Lord Damien doesn't seem pleased by my arrival. Damien doesn't like variables he can't control, Lysandra replied. And you, Elena, are the biggest variable to enter the royal court in years. They had reached a secluded area where a stone bench sat beneath a flowering tree. Elena sank onto it gratefully. Why did the Alpha King bring me here? She asked, voicing the question that had plagued her. What could he possibly want with an Omega who has nothing to offer? In 10 years serving him, I've learned one thing with absolute certainty. The king never acts without purpose. Lysandra paused. Whatever his reasons, they must be significant. Their conversation was interrupted by approaching footsteps. Both turned to see the Alpha King walking toward them, his formal jacket now removed, leaving him in a simple white shirt that gleamed in the moonlight. Captain, would you give us a moment? He requested. Lysandra bowed and retreated, leaving Elena alone with the most powerful wolf in the territories. Walk with me, he said, extending his hand. Elena placed her fingers in his, that now familiar tingling sensation spreading from the point of contact. They strolled until they reached a small pavilion overlooking a reflecting pool. You have questions, the Alpha King stated. Many, Elena admitted. But mostly, why am I here? He studied her face in the moonlight. What do you know about the Omega designation? That we're the lowest rank, the weakest wolves with the least valuable traits. That is what most packs believe, he acknowledged. But it's not the truth. He gestured for her to sit on a bench inside the pavilion, then joined her. Long ago, Omegas were revered, not reviled, he began, his deep voice taking on a storyteller's cadence. They were considered blessed by the Moon Mother herself, gifted with abilities no other wolves possessed. Elena listened, spellbound. The ancient texts speak of Omegas who could heal with a touch, who could sense emotions across vast distances, who could even command elements of nature itself. They were not the weakest of our kind, Elena. They were the most powerful, so powerful that they were eventually feared. What happened? She whispered. Fear bred persecution. Alphas began hunting Omegas, killing them, or forcing them into submission. Over generations, Omegas learned to suppress their gifts to survive, until the knowledge was lost entirely. His expression darkened. What remained was the lie that Omegas are weak, worthless. If that's true, why doesn't everyone know? Because history is written by the victors, he replied simply. And you believe this legend? I know it to be fact. He leaned forward, his intensity almost palpable. My mother was an Omega, Elena, the last true Omega queen in the 6 territories. I saw her gifts firsthand before she died. The revelation stunned her into silence. The Alpha King, son of an Omega? You have her eyes, he said softly. That was the first thing I noticed when I saw you in Northern Ridge. The same amber color that shifts with emotion, revealing what most wolves keep hidden. Elena's heart pounded. What are you saying? I'm saying that you are a true Omega, a wolf with gifts that have been suppressed but not destroyed. He reached out, his fingers brushing the silver pendant. And I brought you here to help you reclaim those gifts. Why me? She asked, her voice barely audible. Of all the Omegas in the territories, why help me? Something flickered in his ice-blue eyes, something that looked almost like vulnerability. Because you're the first true Omega I've encountered since my mother died, he said. And because the territories stand on the brink of war, a war we cannot win through strength of arms alone. He rose, extending his hand once more. The choice is yours, Elena. You can remain here as my ward, protected and provided for. Or you can embark on a path to discover your true nature, a path that will be difficult, sometimes painful, but that might ultimately save not only yourself, but all our people. Elena looked up at him, this Alpha King who had upended everything she thought she knew about herself. The moonlight cast his features in silver and shadow, emphasizing his strength, but also illuminating a loneliness she recognized all too well. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. Show me, she said. Dawn broke over the king's keep with a palette of pinks and golds that painted the stone walls with warmth. Elena stood on the narrow balcony of her tower chambers, watching the royal city awaken below. Smoke rising from chimneys, merchants setting up market stalls, guards changing shifts along the massive outer walls. Sleep had eluded her after her conversation with the Alpha King. His revelations about Omegas, about her, had left her mind racing through the night, questioning everything she'd ever believed about herself. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. Enter, she called, turning from the balcony. Captain Lysandra appeared, already dressed in her uniform despite the early hour. The king requests your presence in the East Wing training hall, she announced. Immediately, Elena hurried to change into the simplest of the garments that had been provided, a tunic and leggings of soft brown leather, clearly designed for movement rather than appearance. She followed Lysandra through a maze of corridors she hadn't yet explored, descending several flights of stairs before emerging into a large open space with a high ceiling and walls lined with weapons of all descriptions. The Alpha King stood in the center of the room, dressed similarly to Elena in training attire, his dark hair tied back from his face. Beside him waited an older woman Elena hadn't seen before, small and wiry, with silver-streaked black hair and keen eyes that assessed Elena with unsettling thoroughness. Elena, the king greeted her with a nod. This is Rava, keeper of the old knowledge and my mother's former teacher. The older woman circled Elena slowly, her head tilted like a bird studying a curious object. She murmured. Yes, there's definitely something there, buried deep, but present. What's present? Elena asked, trying not to fidget under the woman's scrutiny. Power, Rava replied simply. The question is whether we can reach it in time. The king gestured for Lysandra to take position by the door. What we discuss here remains within these walls, he instructed. No one is to disturb us. Lysandra nodded her understanding, taking up a guard stance just inside the entrance. Elena, the king continued, Rava is one of the few remaining wolves who remembers the true nature of Omegas. She will help you discover if you possess the gifts of your ancestors. Rava snorted softly. If, the girl reeks of untapped potential. She pointed to a circle drawn on the floor at the center of the room. Stand there, child. Elena complied, though her nerves made her hands tremble slightly. What am I supposed to do? First, breathe, Rava instructed. Deep and slow. Center yourself. The simplicity of the direction calmed Elena somewhat. She closed her eyes, focusing on her breath as Martha had taught her long ago to manage anxiety. Good, Rava approved. Now reach inside yourself, beyond the human, beyond the wolf. Find the place where they meet, where neither dominates. That's where your true power lies. Elena tried to follow the cryptic instructions, searching within herself for something, anything, that felt different or special. But all she found was the familiar presence of her wolf, subdued and cautious as always. I don't feel anything unusual, she admitted after several minutes. Rava sighed. Not unexpected. Years of suppression, of being told you're worthless. It builds walls within. She turned to the king. We need to break through those walls. The Alpha King nodded once, then stepped into the circle with Elena. Look at me, he commanded gently. Elena raised her eyes to his, immediately feeling that strange connection that had sparked between them from their first meeting. His ice-blue gaze held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Fear is the greatest barrier to power, he said, his voice low and mesmerizing. But fear can be overcome through trust. Do you trust me, Elena? Did she? This Alpha King who had uprooted her from everything she'd known, who claimed she possessed powers beyond imagination, who looked at her as if he could see something in her that remained invisible even to herself. I want to, she answered honestly. A small smile touched his lips. That's a start. Without warning, his hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle yet firm. The contact sent a shock through Elena's system, a jolt of energy that made her gasp. What are you doing? She whispered, fighting the urge to pull away. Creating a pathway, he explained. My mother could do this, form connections that bypassed conscious resistance. As her son, I inherited a shadow of her ability. The sensation intensified, a warmth spreading from his hands into her mind, like sunlight penetrating deep water. Elena felt something stirring within her, something ancient and powerful that had slumbered for so long she'd never known it existed. There, Rava breathed, watching closely. Can you feel it, girl? Elena could. It was like discovering a new sense, the awareness of energy flowing through her body, through the Alpha King, through the very air around them. What is this? She asked, her voice trembling with wonder and fear. This is you, the king replied, his own voice strained with effort. Your true nature, not the lie you've been forced to live. The energy built, swirling between them like invisible currents. In the king's eyes, Elena saw both encouragement and caution. He was guiding her toward something monumental, yet ready to pull her back if necessary. Now, Rava instructed, focus that energy. Give it purpose, intent. How? Elena asked desperately, feeling the power building beyond her control. Imagine something simple, the king suggested. A candle flame, perhaps. Elena focused on the image, a small flame, dancing atop a white candle. In her mind, she poured the strange energy into that visualization, willing it to manifest. Nothing happened for several heartbeats. Then, suddenly, every candle in the training hall flared to life simultaneously, their flames shooting toward the ceiling before settling into a steady, unnatural blue glow. The king released her face, stepping back with an expression of satisfaction. Well done. Elena stared at the blue flames in disbelief. Did I do that? You did, Rava confirmed, her earlier skepticism replaced by something like respect. Raw and uncontrolled, but impressive for a first attempt. Elena turned to the Alpha King, questions tumbling through her mind too fast to voice. But before she could speak, the training hall door burst open, and Lord Damien strode in, his face tight with anger. Cousin, he addressed the king, pointedly ignoring protocol. The Eastern rogues have attacked the border settlement at River End. 30 dead, including women and children. His cold eyes flicked to Elena. Your presence is required in the War Council. Immediately. The moment of triumph shattered, replaced by the harsh reality of the coming conflict. The king's expression hardened into the remote mask of authority Elena had first witnessed in Northern Ridge. We'll continue tomorrow, he told Elena, already moving toward the door. As he departed with Lord Damien, Elena caught the steward's final, contemptuous glance in her direction. The message was clear. Whatever power she might possess, whatever favor the king might show her, she remained an outsider, unwelcome and unwanted in the Alpha Court. But for the first time in her life, Elena felt something new stirring alongside the familiar fear and uncertainty. Power. Chapter 6. The Turning Tide. 3 weeks after her first training session, Elena stood alone in the castle gardens, palms extended toward a small reflecting pool. The water trembled, then rose in a slender column that twisted and danced in response to her subtle finger movements. Control, she whispered to herself, focusing on maintaining the water's shape against the pull of gravity. Precision. She had practiced daily, sometimes with the Alpha King's guidance, more often under Rava's stern instruction. The old woman drove her relentlessly, declaring that natural talent meant nothing without discipline. Impressive, came a cool female voice. shattering Elena's concentration. The water column collapsed, splashing back into the pool. Lady Serena stood several paces away, her elegant figure silhouetted against the autumn foliage. Unlike most at court, she had neither avoided Elena nor sought her company, maintaining a distance that felt deliberate. "My brother was right about you," Serena continued, approaching with measured steps. "You are a true Omega." Elena tensed. Her abilities were supposed to remain secret, known only to the king, Rava, and Captain Lysandra. "I don't know what you mean," she hedged. Serena's smile was knowing. "Please, I grew up watching my mother manipulate the elements. I recognize the signs." She paused, studying Elena with those shrewd eyes so similar to her brother's. "The question is whether you'll master those abilities in time." "In time for what?" "The war that's coming." Serena gestured for Elena to walk with her. After a moment's hesitation, Elena fell into step beside her. The eastern rogues grow bolder every day. 3 more villages attacked since River End. Elena had heard the reports. The Alpha King had been absent more than present these past weeks, constantly in meetings with his generals or traveling to shore up alliances with neighboring packs. "What does your brother hope I can do?" Elena asked. "I'm just learning to lift water from a pool." "My mother could turn the tide of battle with her powers," Serena replied. "She could sense enemies from miles away, heal wounds that would kill any other wolf, even command the weather itself in times of greatest need." She gave Elena a sidelong glance. "Kale believes you have the same potential." The thought was terrifying. Elena could barely control the small manifestations of her power. The idea of wielding it in war seemed impossible. "And what do you believe, Lady Serena?" "I believe my brother has placed a great deal of faith in a very untested vessel." Serena's tone softened slightly. "But I also believe he rarely misjudges character. If he sees something in you worth risking everything for, perhaps it exists." Before Elena could respond, a horn sounded from the castle walls. 3 short blasts, then a long one. Serena's head snapped up, her body tensing. "What is it?" Elena asked. "The king returns, wounded." Serena was already moving, her pace quickening with each step. "Come." They hurried through the gardens and into the castle, where a commotion was already building in the main courtyard. Soldiers carried stretchers bearing injured warriors, while servants rushed to and fro with bandages and water. In the center of it all stood the Alpha King, his clothing torn and bloodied, a makeshift bandage wrapped around his left shoulder. Despite his injury, he barked orders, directing the care of his men before his own. "Kale!" Serena called, pushing through the crowd. The king turned, his face grim but composed. His eyes found Elena behind his sister, and something flickered in their depths. Determination, perhaps, or urgency. "What happened?" Serena demanded, reaching her brother's side. "Ambush," he replied tersely. "The eastern rogues have allied with the mountain packs. They knew our route, our numbers. Someone betrayed us." Elena could see the pain he was masking, the way he favored his injured side. Without thinking, she moved closer, her newfound senses detecting something wrong beyond the visible wound. "You're poisoned," she gasped, the realization hitting her with certainty. The king's eyes sharpened. "How do you know?" "I can feel it, like a darkness spreading through you." Rava appeared from the crowd, her wizened face creased with concern. "Silver poisoning," she confirmed after examining the wound. "Deep in the tissue, beyond my skill to heal." "Take me to your chambers," Elena said suddenly, surprising herself with her own boldness. When the king raised an eyebrow, she added, "I think I can help." "Impossible," Lord Damien cut in, appearing at the king's other side. "The girl has barely begun her training. She'll more likely kill you than heal you." "Let her try," the king decided, his voice leaving no room for argument. In his private chambers, Elena knelt beside the bed where the Alpha King lay, his wound now properly cleaned and exposed. The silver poisoning had left black veins spreading from the entry point, a sure death sentence for any werewolf without intervention. "You don't have to do this," he told her, his voice weaker than before, the poison working faster than expected. "Yes, I do." Elena placed her hands gently on either side of the wound, closing her eyes to focus. The energy within her responded immediately, rushing to her fingertips like water seeking the lowest point. She directed it into the king's body, seeking out the foreign presence of the silver toxin. There, a cold, alien darkness spreading through his system, corrupting the natural flow of his life force. Elena visualized her energy surrounding the poison, isolating it, drawing it out through the original wound. Pain shot through her arms as she absorbed some of the toxin herself, her body instinctively working to neutralize what his could not. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her breathing becoming labored. "Elena," the king whispered, concern evident despite his weakened state. "I'm not finished," she gasped, pushing deeper, finding the last remnants of poison clinging to his tissues. With one final surge of effort, she purged the remaining toxin, collapsing forward as the last of her strength ebbed away. Strong arms caught her before she hit the floor. The Alpha King, seemingly restored to full vigor, cradled her against his chest, his expression a mixture of wonder and concern. "You did it," he murmured, examining his shoulder where only a healthy pink scar remained. Elena managed a weak smile before darkness claimed her. When she awoke, sunlight streamed through unfamiliar windows. She lay in the Alpha King's bed, while he sat in a chair nearby, watching her with those intense ice-blue eyes. "How long?" she asked, her throat dry. 2 days, he replied, helping her sit up to sip water from a silver cup. "You nearly died saving me. It worked then. Better than anyone could have expected." He studied her face. "You've proven Damien and the skeptics wrong. Even Rava is impressed, and she's not easily moved." Elena looked down at her hands, remembering the power that had flowed through them. "I didn't know I could do that." "I did," the king said simply. "From the moment I saw you in Northern Ridge, I knew what you were capable of." He paused. "What happens next is your choice, Elena. You've more than earned the right to make it." She met his gaze, seeing something there she'd never expected. Respect, genuine and unreserved. "The rogues are coming, aren't they?" she asked. "This attack was just the beginning." He nodded grimly. "They'll march on the keep within a fortnight. Our scouts confirm they're gathering forces beyond the eastern passes." Elena took a deep breath, steeling herself for the path ahead. 10 years ago, she had been abandoned at a pack border, deemed worthless, expected to perish. Now she held power that could turn the tide of the coming conflict. "Then we have work to do," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I need to learn everything Rava can teach me before they arrive." The Alpha King, Kale, smiled, and for the first time, Elena saw hope in his eyes. "We begin at dawn," he promised. Outside the window, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, a harbinger of the battle to come. But within the castle walls, something new had awakened. An Omega reclaiming her true power, a king finding his greatest ally in the most unlikely place, and perhaps, though neither would admit it yet, something deeper growing between them. The abandoned girl from the border had found her place at last, not as the lowest of her kind, but as potentially their salvation. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps. And if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.